Okay, so I'm Justin Hendricks. I'm executive director of a thing called NYC Media Lab. How many of you have heard of NYC Media Lab? Okay, good. A few, I'm glad. We're a consortium of universities and big media companies in New York. So we work with Columbia, with NYU, with the New School, with CUNY, with Pratt, et cetera, on media and technology innovation projects, sort of at the intersection of the interests of the technologists and the companies that we work with, and the faculty and students on the campuses who are doing many new and interesting things. So you can learn more about us at nycmedialab.org. I mentioned the event we're hosting next week. Happy to have any of you attend if you are welcome as my guests. I want to thank Dan and Streaming Media for having us and for doing this session today. This is the last one of the day. I'm hoping that you all have some energy for good questions. Absolutely going to try to get to Q&A from the audience, and so please, as we go along, please jot down your questions and think about good ones for this excellent panel we have today to talk about the future of video in a multi-screen world. So you can see, of course, the description for the panel in your program, I'm sure, but in general, the concept here that we're going to try to get at is changing platforms, changing formats, industry dynamics, the dawn of Snapchat, Discover, for Periscope, Meerkat, VR coming down the line, all of those things. We all know that the industry is changing, the consumer behavior is changing. So we're going to kind of try to get at some of those questions with our panelists today. We do have an excellent panel, and I think everybody's names are correct on there, which is excellent. That include Jamie Wilkinson, who's at VHX.TV, Mark Vina, who's VP of Worldwide Marketing at Sling Media, Roger Williams there, VP of Media Operations at Major League Baseball Advanced Media, which NYC Media Lab does some work with, and Sam Lamon, who's a principal at Comcast Ventures. So I'll let each of them, in their own way, say what they do for their respective organizations in response, perhaps to a first question that I'll put to each of them. And then after that, we're going to go into essentially a dialogue. So I'm hoping that they'll talk amongst themselves in addition to responding to questions from me. And then, of course, we'll get to audience Q&A. So cue that up. My first question, I'm going to start with the underdog, start with the startup on the panel, which is Jamie. And Jamie is also, you wearing sneakers? Are you the only guy wearing sneakers?
No, I have nice shoes.
You're wearing nice shoes? Okay, so he's already a way ahead of most of the startups. I'm going to let him take the first one. How many of you know VHX.TV? Okay, good. So an in the know crowd, but you got a little bit of communications to do here. Jamie, when we talked, you sort of explained what you're trying to do with this startup. You were essentially designing a venture for the multi-screen world, for this sort of future landscape that we're supposed to contemplate in this panel. What is the hypothesis that you're testing at VHX.TV?
Sure. So I'm the co-founder and chief executive. We're about a 3-year-old company now. We've built a platform that allows anyone to sell videos directly to their fans from their own websites, either transactionally, and now you can offer it as a subscription. So it allows you to operate a subscription streaming service, and you can get started completely free, and we just keep a chunk of the revenue. The sellers have total control over how many videos they are, how long they are, what price they want to charge for it. And really the hypothesis is the idea that traditionally everything's been controlled by middlemen who are the ones dictating the formats, 22 minutes, 90 minutes, the prices, which are shockingly similar to physical formats. And we have tried to create the internet model of something like that, where we put the control in the hands of the sellers, of the people who know their audiences best, and allowing them to reach and connect directly with the consumer. The idea is that that's where the innovation comes from. That's where you can find out, what is the price sensitivity for these things? Should I charge $1? Should I charge $50? Should I charge, $1,000? And the range of things where it's way beyond just TV and film. If you think about things like VFX tutorials, that's something where you can charge a lot of money for it, for online education. You think about a lot of things that are underserved by the ecosystem of iTunes, Amazon, et cetera, like workout videos or alternative niche content. Or
you mentioned to me yoga videos.
Yoga is our top seller last month. I love yoga, it turns out. And it's really encouraging. I mean, we come in every Monday and there's always a hit that kind of just signed up over the weekend and started releasing their videos. And that's something that we never would have been able to predict. It's something that we never would have been able to go chase after. It's people who are innovating kind of outside the traditional formats, and that's something that I think we're all waking up to with the success of YouTube and YouTube creators, but ad-supported isn't the only way to monetize that kind of content.
Mark, I'm going to put a next question to you. And essentially, you know, when you and I talked, you talked about sort of one of the things holding back the future, the kind of consumer experience. And in general, you sort of talked about the idea that customers, you know, maybe aren't quite living in this brave new world that those of us in the industry are sort of contemplating. What's your perspective at Sling?
Well, I'm the VP of Marketing for Slingbox. Most of you probably know who we are. We've been around for about 10 years, and we're really the only company that lets you access 100% of your TV and DVR content anywhere in the world on any type of device as long as you have an internet connection. And you know, one of the challenges we talked about, Justin, is that in this whole brave new world of over-the-top and you know, the Hulus of the world, the Netflix applications of the world, is that a lot of consumers confuse that kind of capability with the type of capabilities they can get from their cable company. Most of the cable companies offer some derivative of TV Anywhere capability, but there's huge restrictions. We're the only solution on the market that allows you to access your content regardless of geo-blocking. So you go to Asia, you go to Europe, you go to Canada, you can access all that content without any problem. Most consumers think that well, they'll get that same type of experience from their cable company, and the answer is no. There's also restrictions on the amount of content. Most cable companies allow you to stream content in a very limited format. So if you subscribe to a couple hundred channels, you only may get about 25% of your content. So it really goes to the whole topic of customer confusion. You know, in terms of, you know, we offer this kind of unadulterated access to all of your content without any restrictions. But again, you know, we're not as large as a lot of the cable companies out there. So it's sometimes challenging for us to get our message out there.
So confusion, and then we'll kind of come back to that as well.
Sure.
Roger, I was gonna on my notes here. By the way, I just want you to know I set it up for an awesome joke that he's never heard before. I was gonna have him fourth. He was gonna be batting cleanup, but he's third. So I'm gonna just go on straight ahead and just say, you know, we just finished up, you know, a very interesting challenge with you guys. You are servicing a lot of companies now. It seems like, you know, MLBAM is announcing a new partner every other week. What can you generalize about the future of video from the demands your customers are making?
I would say consistently, it's pretty much inconsistent. Each of our partners is trying to do different things. ESPN is distinctly different than WWE, is distinctly different from HBO. What we always try to do is apply basic principles of delivery, of distribution, of codification of platform behavior, platform compliance with chipsets, platform compliance with resource allocations, and you know, down to that level. But at the same time, I think what actually positions us better than a lot of folks out there who either try to attempt to do it on their own or try to provide a service provider metaphor is, one, we understand content. We own the digital rights of the content we do for MLB. But at the same time, a lot of folks are trying to make this as cookie cutter, one size fits all solution, which ultimately we see different variations of distribution, different variations of what the product looks like. And frankly, that's been very informative and very fun because with ESPN, they're trying to, in a very simplistic manner, clearing rights, as many rights as they can, and selling the hell out of it. And then you look at WWE, which is crafting a narrative over the course of a year of a long story that builds up to their big pay-per-view events. And then you see a different distribution and customer behavior pattern and expectation pattern. And then HBO is different with both their top flight content, but you know, a pure brand content company. And so we see, you know, different variations in what customers and clients are trying to do. And frankly, it's been very informative and fun. And whenever we talk to new people and they say, well, we want to do what HBO is doing, I say, well, I don't know if HBO metaphor is right for you, because frankly, you probably shouldn't be doing what HBO is doing. And I think that's really what folks ultimately have to learn, that maybe you don't ultimately look for a subscription product. or maybe it's a pure play advertising product. Or if it's not, doesn't necessarily need to be live, it can be VOD or a mimic live metaphor. So it's all exciting. Going back to the original point, it's somewhat inconsistent, but at the same time fun, and it's all changing and changing every week. And frankly, our portfolio is we're splintering off a little bit on how we service and support them, but they all represent new challenges.
So I'm hearing lots of complexity from the panel, which probably sets us up well for the investor perspective. So Sam, from and I know you're an investor in VHX. That's correct.
Yes.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure for everyone listening. But with regard to if VHX is one worldview that is being tested out in the vehicle of this startup, what's the sort of general theory at Comcast Ventures about the future of video? How would you kind of lay that out?
So I'm not sure there's a general theory. I think if you talk to each one of my partners, we may have a different theory because I'm as confused as everyone else out there. The world is changing so quickly. I don't pretend to have figured it out. But my view is that we're moving into a period of intense fragmentation by distributor. So as the barrier to distribution is decreasing, you're having an increasing number of folks who can scratch your itch as it relates to discovery or intent-based search by genre, by format. You think about platforms like Meerkat and Periscope. They're going to give rise to a whole new crop of creators. And we've seen this with each new evolution in distribution. A set of creators sets out and they figure out new audience development techniques and new formats, and they become the new stars. And WWE is interesting. You think about how they got into this mode of building up towards World Wrestling Entertainment's what's the big
WrestleMania.
WrestleMania. It was only possible because you could do pay-per-view on cable first, and that gave rise to that genre. So I think as we see each new medium arise, we're looking for technologies and tools that help creators scale through new audience development techniques, create good enough content that's economic, and build lasting brands and franchises. So I think if you look at our portfolio, we've done that in a number of ways as we rode some of the trends in YouTube. We were early investors in companies like Fullscreen and Tastemade, big believers in direct-to-fan distribution of premium content that is paid for, which is a big part of the thesis behind VHX. We've been investors in companies like Vox and others who are playing in a very diverse way across all these distribution platforms. But at the end of the day, it comes down to our belief that there's going to be increasing amounts of fragmentation, and that's going to give rise to a number of opportunities for new creators, new technologies to fuel creation and distribution.
And ultimately, when we talked before, you sort of used the term consumer surplus. Is that kind of part of your thinking?
It is. It's interesting. I think it's never been a better time to be a consumer of video right now. You can get almost anything you want whenever you want for a pretty incredible value. If you look at the number of folks who are riding some of these disruptions, though, on the content creator side, there's not a whole lot of people making money. It's not a great business to fund video on spec and hope to get tens of millions of views and monetize that through advertising. Still, by and large, the only way that I've seen it work at scale for companies the size of Comcast or MLBAM or Sling is some dual revenue model with consumer pay and advertising. And the number of folks who have actually executed that in a digitally native way are really, really small. I don't know that there are any that are doing it and moving the needle. So I think the outcome is consumers getting great content, and the underlying platforms, whether they be Facebook or Google or MLBAM, they tend to reap the reward. The individual content owner isn't doing all that well today. And so I think the result is great for those platform owners and great for the consumer.
Mark, is that a familiar sort of line of thinking to Sling?
Well, I mean, from our perspective, if you're talking directly to the advertising component, we actually have recently added advertising to the viewing experience of Slingbox, and we've done that for a variety of reasons. I mean, the specific reason we did that was that we don't have a recurring business model from a monthly access fee standpoint. Not too many people realize that, but the margins we make are based on the hardware that you sell. And there is not a tremendous amount of margin in hardware in 2015. So for us to manage and support the infrastructure that we have from a back-end standpoint, we have moved to an advertising model. Having said that, we do it in we think we do it in a very elegant type of way, because at the end of the day, the reason why you buy a Slingbox is you want to get to your TV content very quickly. You don't want to be littered with ads. We don't want to turn the Slingbox viewing experience into a NASCAR type of thing. So we think we do it in a fairly diplomatic, fairly inobtrusive type of way, but there's no question that from an advertising standpoint, this is exactly where the world is going. I mean, you can't not read articles today about what's happening on the broadcast television side. All those digital dollars, all the dollars right now from an advertising standpoint is shifting in a very dramatic way toward digital platforms. So we're just part of the flow.
Mm-hmm. But one of the things you and I talked about was the idea that, to some extent, in industry conferences and the conversations we have, we talk about this volatility and the change, but to some extent, consumers kind of in the heartland maybe aren't changing their behaviors quite as fast as, is that sort of something?
I think that's a good observation. I think that it really depends on what segment of the population you're looking for. I mean, clearly the consumers who are buying streamer devices are really millennial class users. If you grew up with cable TV, if you're my age, which is not a great age to be at as we get a little bit older in our life cycle. I mean, most of us grew up with cable TV. It would be very hard for me personally to satisfy my television viewing habits with purely a cord cutter type of relationship with the content that I sign up to. And there's different types of behavior that's changing. I mean, I think the most interesting thing I think it's been a good thing, is that just the usage behavior around binge watching. Well, that didn't exist before you saw the Netflixes and Hulus of the world, where you could sit down and watch an entire season of House of Cards, in a weekend. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, from a Slingbox perspective, I mean, what we really excel at is access to live events, especially sporting events. So, and most people are not willing to give that up. They don't want to watch a sporting event in a recorded manner. Not to say that's not, there are some baseball aficionados that love to do that. I mean, I'm a dedicated Yankee fan, and I don't mind watching a game, but I don't really want to know the outcome of the game before I watch the game. Mm-hmm. So sports has always been one of our big selling points. People want access to that, and they also want access to their live local content. Mm-hmm. Again, with a lot of the streamer services that are out there, whether it's Netflix or even Sling TV, which is offered by our sister company, Dish Networks, you don't have access to local channels. So again, Slingbox kind of remains the only solution to do that remotely if you do want to have access to that type of content.
Jamie, should we have called this the future of video in a millennial world? Is that really where the change is happening? Is that something you see?
I do think it is really interesting seeing sort of the divide in behavior between an older generation that's very used to cable and
you calling me old?
Older generation. And sort of the expectations around how cable works, and the idea that it's, I would never get rid of cable. And then when you talk with, teenagers, just how completely inverted the behavior is, yes. and the expectations really, and the idea of waiting is insane, and not having it available on a wide variety of devices, and it's less that cord cutting, right? The conversation around cord cutting, and more really that sort of like cord always and cord never. And I think it's interesting to kind of isolate those two, Mark, you isolated sort of the two spots where TV is still sort of winning. And Richard, and almost throw it to you too, because you guys are helping break it down, particularly sort of the live part of that, that really look up to you guys as the premier solution for live across the board.
Yeah, live is pretty much where most people in this space know us from, but clearly with HBO Now and a lot of what we do for Sony PlayStation Vue, mm-hmm. which also offers local affiliates in certain markets. But live.
If you go out and buy a $500 PlayStation, really PlayStation 4.
But live obviously has a fundamental set of different challenges. It's a lot more difficult, demanding than VOD delivery. But I think a key thing that even if it is a pure VOD play, what a lot of our partners are trying to do, which we ultimately help them with, is to increase the notion of appointment viewing. Mm-hmm. Even though something may be time shifted in how you consume it, to actually compel and bring users into a window in time where it's a shared experience across a large user base. And so even though something may surface in HBO Now or WWE, that's a packaged VOD content that the user can watch at their leisure. Mm-hmm. We try to bring people into or at least our partners in coordination with us, try to bring them into this window to create that moment, that zeitgeist. And clearly with live, it's a fundamentally different circumstance. And we work with Turner Digital or Turner Sports on March Madness for the past, I believe, 4 years. And their digital live numbers are tremendous, and they'll be the first to tell you. The push alerts that they do to drive viewership, and may seem simple, is enormous. And the ads that they sell, or that kick off from that, as a result, is extraordinary. It's just a huge revenue stream for them. And that's a lot of how we treat the live sports metaphor. But a lot of what we do on the MLBAM side is not only bring folks into the live event, which often has its own momentum, but we also try to bring in the contextual with it. So whether it's the contextual statistical display and experience that you can bring with the live experience of just basic stats, or even fundamental stats of breaks on ball, the trajectory of someone's curveball, someone's trajectory of curveball over time, where you actually can ascertain fatigue, the speed at which an outfielder jumps on a ball and makes a play on a lining shot into the gap. All those things add to the rich contextual experience that you just don't get on standard live broadcasts. And I think that's actually the contextual and what you can add different from the live broadcast metaphor is really a key point that we're looking to expand.
So maybe we can pick up on that a little bit, because I just want to say that's one area of technology. I know MLBAM is doing a lot with the StatCast and the other products to kind of accentuate the video experience and kind of bring in other. And one of the things I think we want to get at in this panel is really what are the other maybe technologies or enabling technologies that you think are changing video. Certainly search and video search is changing. There are a lot of kind of fundamental changes in networks, or even in GPUs, wherever you want to go with it, that are going to change the video experience in future. Does anybody have a view on that?
Well, I think you stumbled upon something that's really, really interesting, and that's the whole topic of discoverability. One of the holy grail, in bridging the linear world and the OTT world, is for a consumer to be able to type an actor's name or a name of a program, and if you're signed up for 2 or 3 services and you've got a cable subscription, to be able to find that content very quickly in a very cross searchable way. And some companies do it really well, from a delivery standpoint. For example, Roku does a very, very nice job with it, with their devices. Other companies do not such a nice job with that. So, my particular view is that discoverability, as these worlds become much more robust, and you do have users who have both OTT access and they have access to their cable subscription, being able to find the program that you want or a movie that you want without paying twice for it. How many times does that happen to people where, I just paid for a pay-per-view of a particular movie from, I'll just make it up, from Amazon, for example, and you find out that your Netflix subscription had that content that you could have watched for free. That's a real, real challenge.
So certainly discoverability, recommendations, personalization, context. Those types of things. Are there other technologies? Sam, you're...
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting ones that we've been tracking for a while now is mobile live streaming and how that's going to impact formats. I think we saw. It's been around for a while. There have been many companies who have taken a stab at scaling live stream applications. But if you look at people like Twitch, like YouNow, like Meerkat, it's fostering this more participatory format where the creator is talking to a community, the community is giving real-time feedback, and the creator is adjusting on the fly what the story looks like. And that's a pretty interesting paradigm, I think. We're already seeing folks who are becoming Twitch stars and Twitch celebrities, YouTube stars, or YouNow rather, stars and celebrities. I think we're going to see more and more of that as you have live streaming apps start to focus on specific genres, whether it be gaming or music or comedy. And I think you're going to have more interesting, deeper, engaging experiences between a creator and a viewer. So that's one that we're pretty excited about.
Jamie is live streaming on the VHX product roadmap?
Yeah, we just got to add a couple data centers. And no, it is something, and it's actually specifically for the reasons that Sam kind of touched on around that emotional connection between the creator and the fans. That's something that's become really paramount to our business. I can point to all of the top successes on VHX, and in so many cases, the customers are paying for it almost as a thank you, as a fan club, and then you get a movie for free, right? It's a way of sort of being involved and being connected to an individual, to a very specific brand, rather than being a strict exchange of products and goods and services. And that's where we've seen the most success, and really where our business is angled to capitalize on things is around specific personalities, around specific verticals, a lot of things that get lost in sort of the shuffle when you're trying to create something that's incredibly broad and appeals to everybody. Our strength is being able to reach the small niches where people are very passionate, very underserved. And in those cases, kind of all the normal rules about pricing and what works and what doesn't, and the mixing live and on demand, and not just video, like there's all kinds of things you can do with it. That's always where we see the most success, is when people sort of think outside the box in terms of what they're offering.
So I want to, and we're going to get to your questions now in just a minute, so please prepare them. But one of the things that we sort of mentioned in the panel write-up was the idea of some of these other technologies that are maybe just on the floor. And I saw some of the booths outside where we saw some headsets, some VR-related technologies on display here this year. To the extent that some of these things, I get the sense sometimes, like yesterday I was at the Wired Business Conference and there were lots of Oculus headsets and people were talking about, oh, this is the future, it's going to happen tomorrow. But then sometimes when I'm in conferences like this, people are a little more, come on, is it really ever going to get to quite the scale that, say, the television's got to? So where is this panel at on VR, for instance? Is that part of this future in a big business kind of way?
Well, I think just to piggyback off on some of the ideas brought up, there's a distributed notion of a lot of things going on as far as content owners, but also just technology. Even from a video perspective, distributed notion of how many cameras you can deploy for whatever you need, whether it's something personal or meaningful, or a major production, whether it's a major sporting event or major live event, to where you actually can capture in a coordinate plane or a 360-degree notion of zooming in. You can capture a notion of three-dimensional space of a particular shot. You can capture someone's perspective, like a center fielder or a quarterback out in the field. You can actually zoom in live. And I think that can be applied to, one, just the cameras you can deploy to even capture the compute that's required to render and be able to manipulate images and frames to however you want from a spatial notion. All that comes together and can be applied to VR, can be applied to different video products. And I think from a sports perspective, putting yourself even closer into the action to even define your experience within a live sporting event, which is, I think, distinct to the live phenomenon, and also can be applied to the individual content creator, as opposed to, which I think pivots away from the cinematic notion. That's something that we're obviously very involved in, and I think that's something that'd be a welcomed addition into the space.
Sam, are you ready to put big bucks behind VR?
Yeah, that's my question too, actually.
They're all going to VHX.
Yeah, I got a story.
Nice.
So before Comcast Ventures, I was at a startup building on top of Second Life, which is a virtual world that some of you guys may remember. It was all live streamed in real time. One of the big projects that we did was the Home Run Derby in Second Life, which I convinced myself back in 2005 was going to be mainstream and really big. And there were like 60 of us in a simulator, and 30 of those people were MLBAM or folks from my company. So I've been wrong for a while now, and but I guess it's better to be too early than too late in the business that I'm in. I do believe it's coming. I've seen video experiences in virtual reality, and I think some of the stuff that we will see out of companies like Magic Leap in augmented reality are going to be mind-blowing and really transformational. The technology is obviously there. We see prototypes and demos. there's a bunch of questions in my mind as to when the timing is going to be right. So the technology, it's good, it's not perfect right now. You still see people go and have 3 minutes of experience and get, migraines. That can't happen. It will never, right? So that's one part of it. The other is you have to have the content, the experiences that get people to come back and engage. And right now it's incredibly expensive. Some of that relates to the capture technology. But that will go down over time. Still, the stuff that I'm seeing that's really great is millions of dollars per minute. It's not thousands of dollars. And so I think right now you're going to see a bunch of big splashes. But we got to get to a point where I'm going to spend a couple $100s on my headset or whatever it's going to be. And then I'm going to have enough content to satisfy me so that I feel like I'm getting great value from it. And I think we're a ways away from that. With that said, we are going to be investing in this space. We've already made or are on the verge of making one investment. We'll make a few more. I think it's very real. It's a question of timing now.
It's interesting. Sorry, I was just saying it's interesting for me. I just last night went to 2 different student technology shows at NYU and Columbia, and many different kind of content prototypes using Oculus and other headsets. But it's interesting what people are building from documentary film through to games. So you were gonna.
I was gonna say, yeah, I have a lead for you on sort of the low-cost production for VR for 3D, which is a documentary film, I guess. We're working with called Clouds, created by these 2 guys, Jonathan Menard and James George, who basically figured out how to strap a Kinect to a DSLR a couple of years ago, and then shot this documentary about code and programming that is amazing. It's been at Sundance. It's been all over sort of the interactive art festival circuit, and they've had this serious distribution problem because it exists in this strange space where in between sort of film and game, and like the game people don't want it and the film people don't want it, but it's amazing. And VHX, we're very excited about those kinds of opportunities. So we're helping them because it's normally done as like a 10 gig application that you need to download. It comes with all the videos bundled, and we're helping them kind of unbundle it so the video is all streaming. A lot of the 3D data is all streaming in, and that should be coming out in the next couple months. But there's really amazing stuff happening sort of on that content side that doesn't necessarily need to cost millions of dollars.
So it's almost the end of the conference. We're going to move to questions from the audience here, and I've got a couple at the front. Is there a mic that we're passing, or is it just ask the question and I'll repeat it? Okay. Yes, sir. You here?
I just want to follow up on the VR topic. I'm a VR enthusiast. I work for Fraunhofer. We make the audio for the Samsung Gear VR, and especially Roger for like sports content. I mean, I hear people talk about VR initially as a marketing tool to promote content as a new, hype platform, but also obviously looking to monetizing content for the VR platform. For somebody like you, it must be like a dream thing, selling a season pass first row seat for somebody that's willing to be in the scene and wants to have that experience that he could never afford. Probably in the stadium.
Precisely.
So can we sell 10,000 50-yard line tickets to the Super Bowl?
It's
Yeah.
a completely different monetizing metaphor, or just a fan experience. And you splinter off in different ways, but it's engagement and that's nevertheless like meaningful, and I think people will just absolutely geek out and love it and spend even more time in engagement than your standard live sport duration window. Because it depends on the sport, but it's usually short bursts that people are looking at the tight window. But when you have a more meaningful experience like this, it's going to extend more and more to where you can monetize as a straight product or as an advertising side. We're definitely excited about it.
I mean, the only challenge I have with the whole VR category, and not to say that it doesn't appeal to a niche, it may even break out across the demographic lines that you see with OTT and linear content, is that for us, television is very much a communal experience. We have focused most of our activity on devices, on working with streamer devices, so you can enjoy your content on 50-inch television sets in your living room. You don't have to watch it purely on a mobile device or on a notebook, which has been the history of Slingbox. And the other thing is, and that's not to say that these other things are not important in terms of being able to be able to comprehend a much more robust, vivid experience, is that the whole virtual reality category still has kind of a Google's Glass geek factor associated with it, and Not to say that that won't maybe degrade over time as the experience is so rich, you'll accept that type of thing. But I just don't see it becoming mainstream in the short term. I think there's applications from a marketing standpoint, from a demo standpoint, but it's just hard for me, even putting a price aside and cost aside, seeing it going mainstream where people, hey, I want to watch all my content, a movie content in my house, in my living room, wearing some type of headgear. I just
Can't imagine the family at home,
Don't
all
say
with
it.
their headsets on, sitting around.
I struggle with that. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Just want to piggyback off this conversation. Like, obviously, when you start looking at like live streaming VR and you look at things like the Google Cardboard, I mean, do you see it like obviously if you're saying like you're gonna put something in the first row, like do you really see them standing there with their arms like this for like, that baseball game to take like 3 hours? I mean, like, is it something that's really gonna be a primary way of viewing something, or more like a second screen kind of thing?
I mean, this is really about the multi-screen, right? So I mean, Sam, you're the optimist. Is the
Well,
glass half full still?
I think it's interesting. Now there's a big theme. Everyone's calling the smartphone and the tablet the first screen. And 5 years ago, it was the second screen. It starts small. It's going to be niche. It's going to be some applications that are going to blow the minds of a very small group of people. Maybe they're baseball enthusiasts. Maybe they're B2B applications. I'm not sure yet what it's going to be. It'll get better and better over time. It'll be cheaper and cheaper over time. And the barrier to create great experiences from a content perspective will go down. And so I think, for me, again, I think it's a matter of time. I don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but I've seen quite a bit of VR content right now, and some of the experiences are amazing. I would go out and I would spend $400 on a headset just if I could get that experience once a week for the 20 minutes that I'm gonna consume it. So I think it'll start small, and then ultimately the small screens become the big screens.
Got a question back there, sir. Can you speak up if you don't mind?
How do you contrast that against some of the depth of 3D? Because the cost came down exponentially with glasses, but at the end of the day, people didn't want to sit
So 3D didn't work. The glasses, nobody wanted to wear the glasses. Will anybody want to wear these big bulky things? This is kind of Mark's point. Is it? Jamie?
Why is every movie theater still selling 3D movies then? But I mean, it's maybe an adoption question, or sort of, I guess it's like the early adopter problem, which Sam, I'm sure you guys talk about all the time, where we can only imagine it as it is today, and not necessarily as it might be in 5 years or in 10 years, when and you can start talking about 3D projecting the experiences into the living room, and then the family doesn't have to be wearing weird headsets. Maybe it's something where it's just built into our visual cortexes, right? It's like we can hop, skip, and jump it.
Well, but it also boils down to content too. I mean, if you the movie Gravity, when you watch that in a 3D experience, it's a completely different movie from watching it in a non 3D experience. So I really do think that the content encourages and drives attraction, the usage model. But the problem is just that there's not a lot of compelling 3D content out there. Sometimes it's thrown out there just for the sake of, hey, this is really kind of cool. And when something's typically very cool for the sake of being cool, it's typically something that doesn't go mainstream quickly.
And yet we know that the technology for producing the content is going to continue to get cheaper. The Kinect experiences, the
Precisely.
hacks that people are doing to stitch video together.
Yeah, I think just looking at the devices that we're talking about, I don't think that's ultimately what the end game product's going to look like, or at least what ultimately gets consumed in the future state. But the underpinnings of what gets you there are well underway, and I know clearly he's interested. We're making efforts I wouldn't say to get into the VR space for a VR product as an explicit goal per se, but the things that actually would make that possible, we're well underway in exploring and bringing out into the field.
So you'll be ready. You'll be ready if it happens.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
I was going to say, there's a big difference between virtual reality and 3D as far as the experience. What you experience in virtual reality world is a completely different experience. Would you imagine just the fight the other night, Mayweather, Pacquiao? If you had the virtual reality experience, they had a camera on the edge of the ring, and you can turn around and see Beyonce right in the front row. And
Precisely.
Watch this
Yep.
fight. What would you pay for that? It's an unbelievable experience.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, getting away from the VR, sorry. What's the impact for Roger, but anybody, just because BAM is behind so many of sub-based OTT services that are launching everywhere, but what's the impact of cord cheating for you guys, and how do you try to weather that? I mean, I think it's the elephant in the room that every millennial that we talk about, they're 90% of them are using their parents' passwords on these services. So how do you try to weather that, and how much does authentication play into that, and can that help at all?
So, the services layer, which authentication lives in, is bread and butter for what we do. And it's a distinguishing aspect of what we bring to the market. But it really depends on the product. And I'm going to try to paraphrase what HBO's position has been. But they've looked at, or at least they've said that piracy is something that actually brings the, expands the brand. And they've actually haven't hunted down folks with the rigor as a lot of people, but that's changing, clearly. And then other folks that we've worked with are, no, we got to limit it. We're not going to allow it as much as possible. And it really depends on the product itself. And because I would think the approach of expanding your core offering as wide berth, folks will just apply a different approach to hunting down people that are in breach of single sign-on restrictions, geolocation restrictions.
I mean, beyond the authentication issue, I think the bigger issue really is the economics of the whole OTT versus linear. You know, OTT has this kind of image of, hey, I can become a cord cutter, I can save a ton of money, I can have an equivalent experience to my current linear cable subscription, and in that regard, you know, it's somewhat misleading, which is why cord shavers are starting. That's probably a more accurate way, the way the market's moving, because if you do the math, and there's a number of great websites on The Verge. There's a great OTT configurator, and if you apply to 3 or 4 different services, once you layer on the $30 or $40 you need for a decent pipe, you know, you can probably get a pretty good basic cable subscription that offers more or equal or more content, unless you have a situation, of course, where kids are in college, they're using, or they're getting internet for free. It's part of their tuition, or they're at home and they're using mom and dad's internet pipe for free. That's when the economics start to make sense. But I think that's the kind of topic that a lot of people have ignored. They think it's this nirvana, when in fact, when you lay the math out, it's not as compelling as a lot of people think.
And on top of that, thinking the long game, cutting off folks that are using other people's accounts. They'll eventually age into a point in their lives where they can't afford this. Again, to reiterate, it depends on the product, but for most of our partners, we've seen a longer-term view with that notion of you're trying to expand your user base and folks that have affinity with the brand.
I think we've got time for just a couple more questions. So I tell you what, I'm going to take 3 questions that are real fast, and then we'll see if there's any threads between them. So what's yours quickly?
Question for Roger. Do you feel like Periscope is a threat to pay-per-view events?
Okay. So great. We knocked yours out too?
Well, actually, it was whether Periscope isn't just disruptor in the live streaming space, or there are other disruptors out there that you see. And that was both, I guess, to Sam, Jamie, and Ryan.
Okay. So does Periscope truly disrupt and then?
Multi-view on different screens. So if you're watching a major event, if an individual wants to view a different viewpoint, could that person be looking at a second view?
Okay.
Is there anything coming up like that?
So maybe let's do Periscope first.
Periscope first. Yes.
Is Periscope the disruptor? Yeah.
Is that fast enough? No. Anytime you own the rights, anytime you represent people that own the rights, when it's open and free, it is a threat.
I saw a bit of the Pacquiao stream. I thought it was a pretty poor experience relative to the real thing. So I'm not sure that's what I would be up at night about if I was HBO or ML BAM. I do think it's a very real platform. I think Meerkat's a very real platform. YouNow is a very real platform. Twitch is a very real platform. So when you ask, is Periscope the winner? I think there are going to be several winners. I think it's going to fragment by genre. I think you're going to have people who focus on celebrity, comedy, gaming, et cetera, et cetera. We'll see more and more of these.
Okay. So I'm going to ask take moderator's privilege with 1 minute left to go. Is there any other technology we haven't discussed today that you think is next, perhaps going to define the future of video Maybe Jamie, is there anything that we've left off the docket this afternoon?
Well, actually, Mark, I want to respond to something you said, and sort of this argument that I hear a lot about sort of the cord cutter bundle being just as expensive as the regular cable bundle, which today is totally true, but I think the important thing that people forget about a lot is that it's introducing competition into a market that's been dominated by 5 companies for as long as I can remember. And that inevitably will drive down costs and create much more diversity. And even the hypothesis of our business is around the idea that there won't be 1 Netflix or 5 Netflixes or 5 OTT services. There will be 10,000, there will be 100,000 of them, and that people will be crafting their own bundles.
Does anyone else want to answer the question they wished I'd asked?
Going back to the question of another technology.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Magic Leap myself.
Yeah.
But those who have seen it, who I've spoken to, have had pretty incredible experiences.
Right.
If it's as close on the horizon as it might be, I think that could be a big game changer.
Cool. Okay. So Comcast interest long on VR. Generally, confusion, inconsistency, fragmentation, chaos. That's the future. So you heard it here first. Thank our panelists. Thanks streaming.